Greetings survivors and friends, SHADOWFRAX here, and there's no update this week because the devs have decided to take time off. Oh my goodness, how dare they? Selfish gits spending time with their families. It looks like we might have to do a different video. So I thought, why not? Seeing as it's the end of the year, and I should have done this a lot sooner because I did say I was going to, and then I never did. Slap wrist. Let's have a look at the roadmap and see how we've done. Now, if you haven't seen the roadmap before or don't even know what it is, I shall put a link to it in the description down below. But basically, back near the beginning of August this year, Facepunch put forward a roadmap for Rust in order to get it out of early access and beyond. And there was also a bit of a cheeky disclaimer as well, as, you know, is right to put in. Basically said that any dates or features mentioned here are intentions, not promises, and the only promise we can confidently make is that this information is all wrong. So I want to make it clear that I'm not blaming anyone for anything that hasn't been done on this list, okay? So let's just dive into it, shall we? And the roadmap is made up of 3 sections. Now, next, and later. So now was what was going to be done before the end of this year in order to leave early access. That was the goal. And how did they do? Well, as we can see, they are 82% complete on that one, so we didn't actually get there. But when you look at the list, there's not really that much more to do. So will we see Rust coming out of early access in the first quarter of next year? Highly likely. Let's have a look at what is yet to be done. So we've got the learning curve. Help for noobs, in other words. And some people might say, well, they should learn the hard way. And, you know, the School of Hard Knocks is very effective, but it would at least give the game a veneer of being polished, especially as you consider that eventually the plan is to release it on consoles, and console players need a little bit extra help. Bless them. And we have seen some progress with this already. Hint pop-ups have been popping up lately in the game. With the latest changes to building, we've got a few I noticed popping up about tool cupboards and a task list to try and get people off of the ground. You know, build a fire, make a hatchet and a pick. Don't trust anything with 2 legs, including chickens, that sort of thing. The only other substantial thing on the now list yet to do is AI. And by that, I mean mainly the scientists. The animals are almost there, as far as I can see, and I don't know all the ins and outs, but I can't imagine it being months and months until we've got scientists in the game. So maybe, quite possibly, probably, hopefully, we'll have these in say, the first quarter of next year, and then Rust will be able to leave early access. Huzzah! Right, so looking now at the next section, which has actually been pushed back. Some of these dates have changed, I've noticed. But we're now looking at the first quarter of next year, 2018. And first on the list is Farming 3.0, because yes, we did have a few things implemented that we're not really using, are we? I mean, Helk had a bit of a spurt at one point and put in planters and cuttings and genetics and all this horticultural nonsense, but there's not really much call for it, is there? Let's face it. And that's going to change, because apparently it's going to become an important core mechanic to the game. Presumably, this means that food is going to be more scarce. I mean, I hope so, otherwise there's not going to be any point to it, unless you want something inanimate to talk to. Okay, so next we've got a mountable system. So recently we had chairs that were added, and now we can sit in them, which has made the game so much more playable. But as well as static things that you can sit on, the idea is to have vehicles in the future, and unless you want to be the sole driver and passenger, you're going to need some sort of system that allows multiple players on a single mount. Now, I'm not sure whether these are in any particular order, but this is one that does need to be done early on. Next on the list is the Bradley, and you would think that perhaps it was in a state where it was finished and it's deadly enough, but actually the plan is for it to be even more of a beast. And not only will it be patrolling the launch site as it is now, but it will also boldly go where no Bradley has gone before and traverse the roads of the island, looking for nakeds, presumably. I mean, just look at this. It's going to have 5 machine guns in total eventually. It'll be moving around a lot more as it's shooting you. It'll use its missile launcher to fire incendiary rockets at problem areas where it's being consistently damaged from, but also optional HE rockets to deal with structures. Will it be targeting player bases? Yes, quite possibly. It will still be possible to destroy it though, but it will have weak spots which will have to be taken out before it can be fully destroyed with explosives, so it's not going to be a pushover by any stretch of the imagination. Next, something that I'm excited about, I know a lot of people are excited about and have been requesting for a long time, and that is new arrowheads. It would be another item out of
Concept Limbo,
of course, but also an excellent expansion to our primitive weapons, which is long overdue if you ask me. There's going to be fire, metal and stone. I wouldn't mind seeing explosive and poison on that list as well. Oh, and being able to attach notes as well. I think that's probably most important. Item amounts are going to be rebalanced, so they're going to revisit the values used in harvesting and crafting and reduce them to around 1/10 of what they currently are. So what that means is if something costs 100 wood to craft, it's now going to cost 10. But by the same token, harvesting is also going to yield you 1/10. It's all just about making things less granular basically, and shouldn't really affect gameplay at all, just make things simpler. Damage types too are going to be simplified. There are too many apparently. We've got stab, slash, blunt, and these will just be reduced to melee. Next we've got small monuments or smalluments that will spawn around roads, and we have had some of these such as the sperm get and the petrol station, but it looks like we'll be getting more, and maybe there'll be, really small monuments, just points of interest more than actual enterable buildings. I don't know. I think we're getting to the point now where the island's got enough monuments on it really, and we definitely don't need anything big. The next two are cosmetic really. First of all, player model improvements. We have had a complete overhaul to the player models just recently, but even more variation is planned, better animations, and of course, visible clothing on first-person arms, which would just make us forget any other issues we might have with the game. Hair! Of course, yes, hair. We've got hair now, which is really nice. But what if you could grow it and trim it? Role play as a hairdresser, as you want to do, I'm sure. But seriously, something that has been suggested so many times that I can't even be bothered to remember is for a player's hair/beard to grow longer the longer that they're on a server. Not the longer that they stay alive, I think. I don't reckon anybody's hair would grow at all if that was the case. But it certainly would be, as well as an interesting cosmetic addition, a good reward for investing time in a server. Next we have visible item looting, and this is where items spawn actually in the world, visible on shelves and desks instead of hidden in barrels. We see this in other games such as Miscreated and Daisy, and I don't think this means an end to loot crates. Oh no, because, well, we've got new loot crates being worked on at the moment, so that would be a complete waste of time if that was the case. Something else when it comes to loot will be the addition of Radtown obstacles. So this means locked crates, key cards, broken doors, snapped cables, basically a load more hoops to jump through in order to get the loot. Apparently gaining access to different parts of monuments will require playing, yes, you've got it, mini games, and using items you may or may not have brought with you, beyond which lies a guaranteed reward. Marvellous. Next, some changes to player movement, which will play a big role in other areas. Server-side fall physics. So if a player's connection becomes unreliable, the server should take over movement to prevent hovering players. Don't know about you, but that does always break the sense of immersion for me. Uncoupling player movement from the physics system, which will allow players to move at greater than 60 Hz, and probably most importantly, parented offset movement. What does this mean? Well, basically it will give players freedom of movement on large moving objects. And here it mentions pickup truck beds, large rafts, and even hot air balloon decks. I'm sure they didn't just pick these examples out of the air. Pun intended. Also, we have new spawn options. Spawn near certain static areas on the map, such as lighthouses, making it easier to meet up with friends. Also, experiment with a barge that circles the island, allowing you to jump off at any point and swim to shore. Now, currently, with our tiered map system, all players spawn in one area, but this hints at greater flexibility, perhaps, in the future. Crafting will be overhauled. Craft times are, in general, artificial. Not only will they be reduced, but there will also be, yes, mini-games to speed up crafting, and perhaps factory deployables that craft items instead. Water! Yes, increasing the importance of water should go hand in glove with increasing the importance of food. Here we have perhaps an idea of what some of the small elements may be, water wells, and also another use for water to quench smelted metal and increase its yield. As well as this, you're not going to get so much hydration from other food sources, so this should help make it a more important commodity and increase the survival aspect of the game, something which I think we definitely need. Last on the next list, we have alternative mining. Now, we did just recently have a change to our quarries, which means we can't craft them anymore. They are static monuments on the map. By extension, this means we don't need survey charges anymore, but they will be making a return because we'll have to use them to uncover harvestable resources around the map as well as on cave walls. Will these be the normal resources that we're used to or something else? We'll just have to wait and see on that one. All in all, this section of the roadmap is actually 22% complete. Workbenches were on it, for instance, but they were pulled forward when implementing the new blueprint system. Now we come to the later section, which has actually been pushed back to the third quarter of 2018 onwards. And of course, none of this has yet been touched. Firstly, weight limits and backpacks. We've got backpack models, we've seen those, a lot of you keep asking me about where they are. Well, now you know, they're here. And they're going to be important because if you carry too much, you will become encumbered. Cue sudden flashback to Skyrim. I'm carrying too many feathers. Well, anyway, love it or hate it, backpacks should help with this, as well as enabling you to carry more. There's the potential to change the UI, so the slot limitation in the main inventory will disappear, and you'll just be able to carry as much as you want, and weight will be the only limiting factor. Something else that I'm actually glad to see in here is to be able to move faster on roads. I actually like the way this works in Don't Starve, and I don't know, I'd just like to see this in Rust. It would give more purpose to roads, I think. Okay, so this next one is a biggie. Electricity. When electricity comes to Rust, it's going to change the game forever. But in a good way. Imagine taking what Redstone did to Minecraft and shoving that into Rust. Some of the uses here include having logic gate deployables that control the flow of electricity and allowing players to do such things as place pressure pads that when triggered open or close doors and turn lights on. There's the potential here for all sorts of madness, and I for one cannot wait to get my hands on it. It gets even better though, because the very next section is vehicles. If electricity doesn't change the game enough for you, then there's always hot air balloons, carts, cars of course, rafts and boats. Hey, and animals. Finally, being able to ride a horse or a hog. Imagine a Zerg majestically sweeping over the landscape on a herd of wild boar. Oh, I'm going to have nightmares about that. This is, of course, where the parented offset movement I mentioned earlier is going to come into play and will allow multiple players to walk around on large moving objects. Although, of course, I'm not talking about a horse there. That would look weird. Next will be radios and telephones, which will allow long-distance voice communication in-game and even recorded messages. I'm sure that won't be abused at all. After this, we have a couple of events. First, cargo ship, which presumably will be a cargo ship crashing and spilling its contents all over the place, polluting the oceans, and will have to take part in the cleanup operation. Probably with Sir David Attenborough looking on, tutting heavily and shaking his head. Then we have the Chinook, which will be a periodic event where a transport helicopter delivers a locked crate, similar to an airdrop to a specific rad town. Players will then have to capture and hold this area for a period of time to gain access to the loot. So basically an upcycled airdrop with a bit more of a challenge. A couple of changes that will affect raiding now. First of all, an auto looter, which is an object that will gather loot left behind from dead players, so you gain what the attackers lose in a failed offline raid. That could be quite interesting. And then an attempt to balance online raiding, limiting the usefulness of honeycombing and instead encouraging the use of traps and to add raid notifications and in brackets CCTV cameras. And this is something that I considered in my recent concept Limbo. After that we have prototype weapons, allowing players to roll their own weapons using basic parts such as firing chambers, barrels and stocks. making a semi-automatic revolver shotgun, for instance, or a double-barreled rifle. Crazy. Now, you might remember from a long time back that there was a concept for handcuffs that was never used, but it looks like they are going to be surfacing at some point because a surrendering mechanic is on the roadmap. The way that this might work will be to allow players not recently involved in combat to surrender by raising their hands. Another player can then search them and retrieve a portion of their inventory. However, if they kill them, a small stash containing the remainder of their loot will be dropped, which the murdered player will be able to retrieve later. Surrendered players will be able to have their clothing swapped out. There'll be blindfolds, which will restrict vision when equipped. Interrogation, which, yes, will involve another minigame. I tell you, Rust is just going to turn into one big minigame. I just realised that doesn't make any sense. Anyway, this could allow players to extract information from others such as stash locations and even key codes. And of course, as I mentioned, handcuffs, which will restrict inventory access when equipped, and other players will be able to press use on the handcuff player to shove them in the direction they wish them to go. And I'm sure this mechanic won't get out of hand or be abused in any way or used for any other purposes. Next we have gestures. Again, something that might well help with communication, but would be fun anyway and would be great for cinematics. And weather, or the return of weather. I mean, we've had rain before. Yeah, that's about it, really. Oh, we had a bit of snow at one time, but perhaps something more extreme? Perhaps something that would be a danger to players, or even, I don't know, damage bases or something. Mortar cannons, yes, another concept that has been hanging around the land of Limbo. Something that could deliver explosives from a long range and out of your line of sight. I'd be interested to see how that works out and how you're supposed to aim it. Food preservation. In addition to food being more scarce and valuable, improperly kept food will spoil. Finally, a use for the fridge and also salt, which I'm sure there's not going to be any scarcity of anytime soon. Perhaps you'll be able to harvest it from player corpses. Then we have Tier 2 cooking. Complicated recipes such as chicken dinners or stews that provide temporary bonuses to things like max health, radiation resistance, or movement speed. New deployables, such as stoves, that provide more reliable and faster cooking of meals. Notice here, no mention of pies. I think perhaps Helk is afraid that they'll be too OP. Well, don't worry, Helk, it's fine. I can reassure you I have done plenty of research on the subject. Next, console versions. At some point, when the game makes sense and has very little confusing elements and performance issues, deploy console versions, because console gamers are notoriously easy to confuse. However, I'm glad they put this in here because this is something that I get asked about on virtually every update video. When are we going to have console versions? I really want to play Rust on my console. So many of you say, well, here's your answer. Fractional reloading, yes, that's something that annoys a lot of you, isn't it? Well, here you go. It will be sorted out eventually, but it's certainly not the priority at the moment. Wipeless Rust is next, and this is something that I did want to do a video on. I might end up biting the bullet and just doing it, because the question of whether you could ever actually get to a point where Rust servers never need to wipe is something that I'm still trying to get my head around and figure out whether it will ever work. Apparently the plan at the moment is to have a system that allows top level players to sacrifice their progress for a permanent reward and start over with that advantage. Graduating to that level should be done with groups of players periodically, so it feels like a fresh wipe each time it happens. So like a prestige system. Now, how you decide who the top level players are, how you group them together, how this actually works out is something that we're just going to have to wait and see, but it could be interesting. Aha! Now the next one, multiple islands, and this does intrigue me. Using boats to cross the ocean to other more dangerous uncharted islands. Now does this mean moving to other servers, as has been suggested before, on Gary's mind map for instance? Or will these islands exist within the same server? Either way, I'd love to do it. Sailing the briny deep does of course mean maritime gameplay, rafts and boats with different engines, scuba gear, dive locations and underwater resources, and it would be good to see the underwater areas of Rust's map actually used for something, because at the moment they're just dead space. Lore reveal. Actually start revealing some lore about the game to the players through hidden messages and items. There's been a lot of speculation about this. I've got my own theories as well, and I will be producing a video about this at some point, so do stay tuned. And I'll do that just as soon as I've got everything ironed out. Next, and something else that I briefly mentioned on my most recent concept Limbo, and that's RustNet, an in-game internet. You'd be able to access working in-game computers, maybe even the laptops that we currently have, and use them for a variety of purposes, including bounties, remote access to devices such as CCTV cameras located in rad towns. No mention explicitly as to whether this includes CCTV cameras on your own property. However, it does mention perhaps offering access to your own devices for a fee. You'll be able to place a listing for a job, so perhaps even setting quests for other players, and emails of course, so that you don't actually have to leave your base and meet other people. And so we come to the last item on the list, which is item levels. Imagine instead of crafting just a generic item, you'd be able to make something a little bit more special, with better levels and stats. These could offer advantages over lower level versions of themselves, such as reduced costs, higher protection for armor, or slightly increased damage for weapons. Phew, now that was quite a lot to get through, but what do you think about it? I'm sure you've got something to say, so please leave me a comment down below, and I will try to read as many as I can. Was there something on the list that you were particularly excited about? Is there something that you don't like? Was there a feature that you were hoping would be on the roadmap and that was missing? I'd like to know. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Come and visit me on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and my Steam group too. I shall of course catch you soon, but in the meantime, keep calm and stay rusty. Cheerio.